the beauty of what we are speaking about in the higher metaphysics as God perfecting itself in man. God did not create man. The concept God did not create man. Man created God.
That's right.
And when you understand that man is the creator of God, then you understand that man is God. Because all concepts that we could ever perceive of God is still flawed. We are still perfecting our perceptual antenna so that we become higher and higher, so that we perceive more and more of that which we perceive as God. But understand that God could not perceive of itself, because if it is all knowledge, it could never know itself. It could just only be. So what it did was it began to detract or separate from itself, and as it separated from itself, it created a void. And that's what they speak about in the Bible. As God separated from itself, the void that they talk about in the beginning, that's the beginning. The beginning happened when God separated from itself in its attempt to know itself. You want to deal with deep metaphysics, then we could go into that. But to explain it the way you do, verbatim, and then try to put limited intelligence to the words, you do yourself a disservice. You do the work a disservice that your ancestors left for you. So the separation of God from itself to know itself ended up being polarity, which is why we have the masculine and feminine principle. That separation to create the void, that void that we are feeling with one another when a man needs a woman and a woman just needs that man, that's the void. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth, and the earth was without form, and everything was void. Yes, there was a void. That void was when the Most High pulled away from itself to know itself. Because being all of itself, it could only know itself. It could never know itself. It could only be. In your book in Exodus, you saw that Moses was spoken to, and he said he was spoken to by an entity called that said it was I am that I am. And then again he turned to be I am. So I am that I am speaks to a static perfection. No movement. When you say I am, or I am that will be, that's that static perfection in movement. And I am that will be became Adam. And Adam left the garden, or was kicked out of the garden. He had to be kicked out of the garden, because perfection is death. That's why the Most High creates, in order to perfect itself. Anything that's totally perfect dies of its own volition, because there's nothing to do. Cancer perfects itself in your body. How does cancer perfect itself? By killing you. So, cancer, in its movement towards perfecting itself as cancer, kills you. So as it moves towards perfection, cancer dies as you die. That's why Adam had to be kicked out of perfection. They tell you that the Garden of Eden was all perfect. Why was it all perfect? What happened in the Garden of Eden that changed the perfection? If it was all perfect, then anything existing in the garden would be perfect. Who was the serpent? If the serpent perfect, then obviously the serpent was also perfect. Because nothing was allowed in the garden that was not perfect. Everything was perfect in the garden. And they say except the serpent. But the serpent was God. The serpent was an aspect of God communicating to itself through Adam. And it said, it's time to leave. You must eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil meant polarity had to be created. And in the polarity did God begin to reflect and see itself in the mirror of its own creation. And then Adam was kicked out of the garden, but Eve stayed. Read your Bible. If Eve stayed, that meant that Eve was the beginning of the perfection. Eve was the garden. So understand that what you read and what you're studying has a greater depth of knowledge and calculated wisdom seated within, buried within, laying comatose within. That is the Osirian body that is wrapped up in all of the wrappings, and they do the ritual to bring forth the body of Osiris again. That is why Isis, who is the symbol of knowledge, has to raise her husband Isis from the death, because Osiris is wisdom. Knowledge without wisdom is lost. She roams the countryside. Knowledge is how do you say? It defeats itself, its own reason to be, without wisdom. So understand that the feminine principle is the vessel of knowledge. She is the one. That's why this age is a female age. The computer age is a female age, because it's all about gathering knowledge and information. That's what it is. Gather information. The feminine principle is the gathering of information. But the tincturing of that information into wisdom is the masculine principle along with that. And that's what's been missing in our black community. We don't have the masculine principle lending the wisdom to all the knowledge that the females herself brings in. And she's a vessel that is necessarily part of the scheme of the knowledge-wisdom circuitry that is missing inside of our own genetics, or is being systematically bred out of our children today in the education system. And this amalgamation of gender duties that has our sisters doing things outside of the structure of their own bodies. We have to put sisters in war gear now because we have to fight for our independence, but that's not their purpose. The sister's purpose is to teach and raise a nation, and she should be kept stress-free. Because if you have babies coming through a woman who's stressed, what kind of baby are you creating in there?